Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha, the two strongest shinobi of not only the modern era, but to ever live. Naruto and Sasuke being two characters who have saved the entire planet from alien invasions, not once, not twice, but arguably 3 times. Two shinobi capable of destroying the entire shinobi continent, according to the Shikamaru Shinden novel. This continent being one to not just hold the Land of Fire, but all 5 nations, making up the entire world in an almost Pangea-like supercontinent. Then we have Edward Whitebeard Newgate, a character who is capable of shifting tectonic plates and destroying the planet, all for the cause of saving his beloved son and second commander, Portgas D. Ace. The Whitebeard Alliance, housing a total of 43 ships, with 4 more of his own, and then Luffy ships, plus the hidden paddle ship, making his total of 49 ships compared to the Marines' 50, hinting at a writing tactic that Oda loves to do when writing, such as when he has rivals be 1 centimeter in height apart to demonstrate which one of them is actually stronger, this hinting that Whitebeard was never going to be able to defeat the Marines from the beginning. So what if the strongest shinobis ever actually tried it? Could they capture Ace and rescue him from the Marines? Well, let's find out. Firstly, let's establish that Naruto and Sasuke will be starting from the point that Whitebeard arrives, so they won't actually have to go through the impel down, as I think that leads to too many, well, they might do this or they might do that type decisions. With that being said, considering they also don't have a pirate fleet of 49 ships strong, they will also be, they'll also take some groups back to back in like a gauntlet style, just still not breaking the whole point, but instead to avoid of discussions like Naruto and Sasuke versus the warlords, admirals, vice admirals all at once, etc. And it'll just be more like back to back, no rest battle, whatever strategy they might try. So firstly, there will be timestamps for everything, but let's begin with how strong Naruto and Sasuke are at this point in their series respectively, with a lengthy section. So, by all means, if you want to see the interaction, then please skip to this time on screen. But firstly, I want to establish that Naruto and Sasuke are equals, or are very close to, with Sasuke's databook stating that he is a warrior of strength equal to Naruto. This is extremely important, as this means they can both scale to either interpretation you take for whichever interpretation you really give, for Naruto being the higher or lower ones. And I will of course set double interpretation baselines for the One Piece cast and the Naruto cast, so you can decide for yourselves which side you actually agree with, and so I don't get crucified in the comments. But here, I'm just going to go with both, because I actually do believe that Naruto and One Piece are very comparable scaling wise. So just how strong is this naval force? Well, Monkey D. Garp, Luffy's grandfather, isn't really a top 3 strongest naval officers, as we know that Aokiji has stayed the strongest officer at the Marine HQ upon the 3 admirals' introduction. It's also noted that how they are the Navy's strongest officers, this meaning that Garp is sort of a middle ground character, and in his prime, which has been a rather stagnant level since, was able to one-shot and nearly kill Don Chinjiao, a character who could literally split continents, which should give you an idea of just how strong some of these weaker characters can be with these middle ground characters like Garp, who can one-shot them. However, to truly grasp the ability of these admirals, we need to first understand how large the One Piece planet truly is, and to claim it is equal to Earth in size would just be preposterous. And when researching this, I found that even within the One Piece community, it's consistently thrown around that the world may even be geocentric, which is essentially where stars orbit a planet rather than the other way around. And I mean, this is probably just not true. I could simply just argue that the demonstration of the planetary system is wrong, since there's no way to ever place these celestial bodies at their like 1-for-1 ratios, as it's quite literally impossible and just wouldn't work here, unless you think that just for some reason this is just a really out of place perspective shot, which is likely just wrong. This is due to things like the Roche limit, which essentially is how close one celestial body or object can be towards another without actually falling apart per se. This limit is roughly 167,000 kilometers, or this is what we use for it. So therefore, any correct measurement of a geographical demonstration based on Earth and our moon would just be proportionally wrong, since you would never be able to actually see the moon piece, considering the Earth's entire diameter is around 12,000 kilometers, making that distance ridiculous. So trying to calc this and base the planet size off this would just be erroneous. However, saying that the planet is likely large planetary due to its moons having moons probably isn't that disingenuous. This is paramount here, as we actually are made aware several times that both the Yonko and the admirals are comparable as individuals, regardless of which side you actually think is greater. This is crucial, as Whitebeard is stated by Sengoku to be able to destroy the world, with this idea being backed up by his Viver card as well, lending credence to this. And many people do call this hyperbolic. However, I actually don't think it's inconsistent to call it literal. If you actually think this is entirely, hyperbolic and want to be a skeptic weirdo, then by all means just argue that the relevant characters here are all just continental based on the Chinchou scaling and move on. But, you can take this a few different ways. Firstly, being that since Whitebeard's ability is derived from the Tremor fruit, which is, a technique that allows him to shake and affect tectonic plates, this isn't probably a hyperbole. And in the data books, we are also made aware that devil fruits are only as strong as you train them. And when Marshall D. Teach gets the Tremor fruit without any training at all, he is able to shake the entire ocean, meaning that the feat of the lowest end with this fruit grants you, this level of a feat. So when considering Whitebeard's decades of training and battling with it and experience, saying he could affect or destroy the planet, or at least shift the tectonic plates enough to affect it, probably becomes a bit more consistent. Now, while this old Whitebeard is still arguably greater than the admirals in AP due to the volume 57 statement mentioning how Whitebeard is the strongest man in the world, and while there is skepticism to be made with other statements such as Shanks being said to be standing alongside him as equals, I don't think this really retcons anything, and this can just mean that Shanks has achieved a similar status to Whitebeard, or he is just actually equal to old Whitebeard, who appeared at Marineford, which could actually give us a good gauge of Whitebeard's level if he wasn't deathly sick prior to going to Marine HQ. As we could see, a holding back Akainu and Shanks were able to clash. This isn't inconsistent either, or at least inconsistent to say that fighters can be greater than Whitebeard, but lack the AP, as Mihawk, as in the same scan, is said to be the most powerful swordsman, making him greater than Shanks, who you could just maybe say is equal to old sick Whitebeard. And this is, and maybe this old Whitebeard then is kind of like a glass cannon who could just, be damaged by attacks much weaker than what he could ever dish out. And you could just say that the world's strongest man statement is merely a title due to his comparisons with Roger back in the day, and now the admirals are at their level. Maybe you just think it's due to his abilities and with the Tremor fruit. Either way, there is certainly large planetary scaling for most of the top tiers on the Navy side, such as Akainu, Kizaru, Aokiji, and Mihawk, and other characters who may scale to that potentially, or just scale a little closer to the continental ranges, which is probably a lot more consistent. And this isn't really the peak of the high tier scaling, as there are some One Piece star level metas is garbage. And excuse me, with this meta being, derived from how Blackbeard directly compares himself to pure darkness and Portgas the Ace to the sun itself during the battle for Blackbeard to be brought back to the crew. Now, what does this mean? Well, we get a further elaboration on this on the side of the official Shueisha volume special for One Piece, where in this scan we actually get two passages, the first one being the upper middle paragraph stating that regarding Blackbeard's mysterious ability, which is the dark devil fruit, can be translated to, quote, a black hole is a celestial body that has such great gravity that not even light can escape. And this isn't all, as it also goes on to mention a British scientist named John Mitchell who hypothesized, quote, if there is a star that has the same density of the sun but is 500 times larger, the escape velocity will exceed the speed of light, end quote, meaning that Ace would somewhere be in this range to escape being star level. However, it doesn't stop here, as this isn't all from the volume special, because we also get this translated omitted from the bottom portion of the scan, in which this reads things such as, quote, the power of this technique can swallow an entire town level, end quote, or other ones such as, quote, also it is said to have the technique that has an infinite attraction and that not even any light can escape whatsoever, end quote, with the guide also stating things like a black hole and just referring to it as such. And obviously with this statement here, it makes it pretty clear that Blackbeard has something very similar to a black hole in its function, or kind of. But why do I say similar and not directly a black hole? Well, it's fairly simple. Blackbeard's ability doesn't have the properties of a black hole, as it is shown hurling out all sorts of debris from the previous devoured town, and that alone isn't something that a black hole can physically do. And I don't really have to explain why floorboards of this tavern would have 500 times the mass of the sun. And Blackbeard claims that due to possessing this fruit, that he is now in fact the strongest pirate in the world, with Ace beating him to the ground just prior. So I mean, if you take this hyper literally, then he is also just star level, and that's fine, but like, I personally wouldn't change that and give it that much charity. This means that Naruto and Sasuke could damage these top tiers and virtually anybody at the HQ. This is due to their many different avenues for attack potency. Firstly, the higher interpretations has a few different routes, the first being how we know that Naruto and Sasuke by this point are actually able to keep up with Fuse Momoshiki rather casually, with a heavily drained Naruto catching Momoshiki's attacks and being capable of hitting him back, demonstrating relativity to Momoshiki to the point where Naruto's Super Odama Rasengan formed with his son Boruto is able to equal out the Rasengan Momoshiki copy from from Boruto, with the novelization stating that they are both using their greatest attacks. This would then be, above the chakra that was used to create an entire parallel universe, with these post-Shippuden era novels also having much more impressive feats for Naruto, such as a chakraless Naruto being able to dodge photons while deathly sick, and Sakura being able to combat and increase her power to match Kido, who can amplify his own by a power over 100 times. Now, I do of course hold my own issues with some of the novels, primarily the Hiden and Retsuden novels being canon, but I want to address the common debunk to them, which is the supposed timeline that actually substantiates them as canonical, in which people will say, well, this has to be wrong because the last can't come after chapter 700. And I mean, well, yes, this is true. That's just not what the timeline says. These arrows are indicating what's the passage of time here, and it's made clear that the last comes between 699 and 700, which does fall in line here with the timeline, so that's just not a very good debunk. More of these higher interpretations can substantiate this at face value, however, again, and I'm not going to go over every single Naruto AP meta, as that's its own video, but some, you could draw as while Kaguya creating her dimensions is questionable, since the translation implies she weaved them together to her liking, which could just support that the dojutsu, the Ameno jutsu, actually created it, similar to how Kamui and the Daikokuten dimensions could have been made. And we do actually have similar translations for this, implying that Kaguya actually warps and swaps the dimensions out or summons them, rather than teleporting who she is actually combating to another one, meaning that she is capable of doing this to the main Naruto universe, which would mean that Kaguya can alter and warp a universal size space several times over. This is a feat that reminds me of how Son Goku during the Tournament of Power was capable of shaking the entire world of Void, making him low complex multiversal. Now, while Kaguya isn't really interacting with anything like that, the jutsu can still function like this, with it being consistent with things being implied, like the jutsu uses so much chakra that she is the only one capable of using it. This means that Three-Eyed Madara's entire chakra reserves couldn't use one. There are also arguments such as Kaguya going to destroy her literal time space, and Naruto's chakra being the primary source for literal tears in the fabric of the universe. So my point is that while I've never been a super large advocate for Naruto being universal, as I think it's not that consistent, it's certainly not an outlandish take, just similar to how Blackbeard can be star level. I just don't give it that charity. But please, if you are going to give the benefit of the doubt for Blackbeard's star level scaling, then by all means, give it to Naruto and Sasuke as well, and vice versa. Getting Naruto to this large planetary to star level is actually very easy with several methods. First being the Toneri moving the moon, which would require large planetary levels of forces, with this being a Toneri who weaker than Naruto could actually one-shot. So, I mean, you have what you will, and we'll come back to this in a second, but we also have Sasuke moving the Final Valley Chibaku Tensei meteors, calced at small planetary as well. We have characters that, like, Sasuke blatantly scale above, beings like Kenshiki, who are capable of splitting worlds apart, which is interesting not only for Sasuke scaling casually too, but also just planetary scaling in general. But the anime also has this scene showing Kaguya's night sky, displaying a full sky of stars and a moon that has a moon. This being one from the similar, smaller dimensions. And while this is the anime, I just figured it'd be quite interesting to point out, seeing as the One Piece planet has, a moon with a moon as well. So I guess Kaguya's can too if you use the anime. If you actually count everything in Kaguya's dimensions that she created herself, you will have 3 moons, 4 stars, 7 planets, with this being a low ball. So, I mean, considering how Naruto was able to keep up with and equal out Kaguya several times, we also have Naruto and Kurama being a force greater than Kurama alone, who has 2 statements in the 3rd and 4th data books that say he could either destroy a planet or just, turn it to ash. Last but not least, we'll come back to the Toneri being able to move the moon feet, with him actually wanting to slam it into the earth, and this is actually calced at large planetary. However, the common debunk to this would just be, it's hollow, but this is just wrong and silly. The most hollow like a moon or a celestial body like this could ever be would only be 15%, or else it would literally just simply float off into space. So yeah, this is just another planetary feat for Naruto and Sasuke, meaning that it's certainly fair to say that Naruto and Sasuke could just most certainly damage and keep up with anybody at Marineford in terms of AP. And just for fairness sake, with these lines of scaling, most of the higher tier characters at the HQ as well could damage Naruto and Sasuke if you give them that generous interpretation, and just to make things a little more fair. And we'll be right back after this commercial break. Tired of stupid content? Look no further. Subscribe to Virtue now. Okay, all jokes, but if you are interested in what you've heard, then by all means, maybe check out my channel or just subscribe after this. But anyway, back to the video. But how about for speed? Can they keep up with each other? And I know this is the most controversial section. I know this is the most controversial section, as One Piece's speed meta is very complicated. Firstly, by this point in the series, there are 3 main points that I could think of for the Straw Hats, and where they're actually just interacting with a light-like substance. This being Foxy's photons, the Pacifista lasers, Kuma's pad cannons, and, again, there's also, Sanji, intercepting Kizaru. But beginning with Foxy's photons, I think this one is the worst out of the 3, as we know that Foxy never really asserts these to be just photons, but actually refers to them as slowpoke photons, and even admits that these are just an undiscovered particle in the universe. And this is consistent with these supposed photons. These photons, do also have other properties that question if they are just truly moving at the speed of light, and this is how physicists generally agree that light can only bend up to 8 degrees, with Foxy's photons appearing to bend more than a full 180. They also pass through Luffy, a median, linearly, when they should also just be sort of absorbed by his body, according to NASA's official website. So to be brief, this method of FTL scaling isn't that great. We also have the Pacifista lasers, which is actually calced under the speed of light, according to the Lounge's Battle Wiki, which is a pretty reliable source for all things calcing and even translations in regards to anime, so the link will be in the description for that. Now, there are still other feats that set these characters FTL, and to avoid having to make an entire separate video on Luffy's scaling, I want to address the pad cannon here. And to address it, the problem to where this actually comes in is simply how it's described in the way that it's never stated that the shockwaves themselves travel at a constant speed of light, but rather the initial burst of air that propels these shockwaves does indeed move at the speed of light, meaning that Zoro isn't really blitzing some light speed attack. So does this mean that there isn't any FTL scaling at all? Well, of course not. My friend Marv has actually calced Sanji intercepting Kizaru at FTL, as shown on screen. So then from here, you can go a few different ways. Some people just really like to take One Piece stupidly high and say Gear 2 is a 10 times multiplier, which isn't true, as this is a French guide, and the Japanese one never actually mentions anything about this, with the only other, applicable AMs being a strength only thing, not speed. If for whatever reason you do still believe, in the speed meta and it falling through, then by all means take it. And then in the One Piece 3D2Y movie, we are introduced to a character named Burndy World, who is capable of amplifying his speed by 100 times, which at first Luffy was getting kind of beaten around. However, towards the end of the fight, or at least of this encounter, Luffy was able to amplify his own speed to match Burndy, meaning that Luffy can increase his speed by 100-fold, and then even higher, with Gear 4 implying several times multiplier, making Luffy, then hence and the Admirals, absolutely ridiculous, sitting at 300 to 400 times the speed of light. So, similar to how I did to the novels, which are questionably canon, the 3D2I movie just likely isn't, or at least needs a lot more stretching to say so. When people argue that definitionally the word canon just means that considered authoritative to the original material, this typically requires the additive source holding 0 contradictions, making it then canonical. With logic like this, you can then virtually state that, well, way too many movies, novels, and additives are canon to the original series, so I would just take this with a grain of salt. I have heard people say that Luffy's main amps were just always only by several times, and now we have Luffy gaining 100 times increase without anything at all, so maybe this is just a contradiction in and of itself. And I usually disagree with these, but I would definitely take this with a grain of salt if I were you, if you are going to say that these are canon. Now, with this being said, for Luffy's speed, you can see that he has this giant scale where you can place him speed-wise. This is very similar to Naruto and Sasuke's speed, but since Luffy can, and is this speed, I want to make it clear that the Admirals, Whitebeard, Mihawk, and all of the other main contestants can also scale to this exact level of speed through both narrative and scaling. We know that the entire narrative for this arc and Oda's introduction of Whitebeard was to set a benchmark of where Luffy's power would eventually need to be, seeing how far Luffy's actually become. The heights he still has to touch are yet just so far off. Luffy has saved so many people and has been able to live out the freedom that he desires to be at the top of the world, to be the Pirate King. However, he still needs to be much, much greater than this. Whitebeard, whose narrative purpose is quite literally to emphasize that this old, sick, and crippled Whitebeard has gained the respect of thousands and has portrayed as a hero. This man could literally destroy the entire planet with him combating the Admirals, the greatest force in the world, and him standing atop. Yet this is nothing compared to his prime, a prime so different that this man was once known as the strongest man in the world due to him being able to actually rival Gold D. Roger, the Pirate King, the man who has achieved Luffy's dream. This just showing the astronomical heights and differences between Luffy and our top tiers at Marineford. This isn't even all, as Whitebeard's symbolism is much deeper than you think in regards to his mustache actually resembling a crescent moon, which is actually an alchemic symbol representing silver corresponding to the sun, which represents gold, also alchemically corresponding to the sun, who was obviously Gold Roger in this scenario, and this narratively emphasizing that while Roger may have died too young to actually see the rise of his pirate era, his legacy will always live on as the sun sets and shines on the moon to sit atop the world. So this narrative between Roger and Whitebeard is very deep and likely shouldn't be underestimated. As for Naruto and Sasuke scaling in speed, this also just is complicated, but maybe not as much to the Naruto point, but it's also the most misled point in every Naruto versus One Piece video, with the Naruto speed levels just being outright sad and subpar to what's narratively actually displayed. Naruto at his high ends as an adult can reach speeds over 50,000 times the speed of light through a few different methods, such as adult-based Naruto scaling far above 6 past Sage Mode Naruto as a teenager, with the adult counterpart scaling to characters like Kaguya, who felt the need to amass an army to stand against characters like Momoshiki and Kenshiki, who Naruto can combat. I think it's fair to say that KCM2 is a greater amp than CM2, and if you disagree, then I'm sorry, I don't really know what to tell you. This means that KCM2 is at least a 10 times amp in speed, as we know that Sasuke's speed significantly increases whilst in KCM2. Then the argument then has base Naruto being inferior to base Might Guy during the war arc, which is just likely true, as KCM, Naruto, and Guy were able to combo attack together against Obito, with Guy's 8 gates technique actually being translated in the 4 data book to be an increase of over dozens of times. That's right, dozens, which is obviously plural, meaning at least 24 times, and Naruto's base 6 pass state is shown relative to this 8 gates Guy, at least at a bare minimum. I mean, base 6 pass Naruto pressured Madara so much to where he instantly absorbed the God Tree out of fear, so taking this is probably pretty low ball here, but this just means that Naruto's base 6 pass amp is a 24 times amp as well, and then he just stacks KCM2 onto that, creating 6 pass Sage Mode, making a 240 times amp. And even being generous, you could then say that Naruto is just the speed of light from dodging the Raikage, and then now you have adult Naruto stacking another 240 times on top of that previous 240 times amp, since we know that again base Naruto is as an adult at least is above 6 past Sage Mode Naruto as a teen. So pretty ridiculous numbers for Naruto's high end scaling, and yes, there are higher ends, but as I do with One Piece, I'm not really saying whether I agree with this speed scaling for adult Naruto. I'm just leaving it here, but I just certainly had to mention it, as every One Piece video or One Piece versus Naruto crossers video I've seen is just saying that Naruto's like 1 or 2 times the speed of light, saying One Piece is 20,000 times the speed of light. So please, if you're going to give them this charity, please do it on both sides. With the opposing arguments of Naruto being much slower, such as some people who think 6 past Naruto is just barely above the speed of light due to his performance against Madara Uchiha's Light Fang Jutsu, or maybe you think Naruto is FDL as early as the Haku in Land of Waves arc. So by all means, do what you will with both One Piece and Naruto scaling, taking both the high ends and the low ends, which this may seem weird, but I know not taking a stance on any of these would be kind of weird, and if I did though, it would just get me crucified in the comments. So I'm just leaving this to you guys to decide which one you actually think is the most accurate and most narratively based between these Titanic characters and series respectively. With all things being said, you'll notice that on the high ends of the top tiers at Marineford, they can at least keep up and interact with Naruto and Sasuke, and vice versa. Same goes for the lower ends as well. So nobody wants to sit here and listen to some goon power scaling as I say why Naruto is 6.93% faster, and I'm just going to say that they are comparable but similar to AP. I've just left your own interpretations based on what you want to say for these characters. So with Naruto and Sasuke arriving, you'll notice that Whitebeard infiltrated the bay with his Moby Dick pirate ship. Naruto and Sasuke obviously don't have a pirate ship, obviously due to them not being pirates. So just saying that they body flicker onto the island, or Sasuke opens up a portal somewhere on the island, maybe on the top of the HQ that looks like a town, to give Naruto and Sasuke an aerial advantage, or just land somewhere else on the island. This would make a lot more sense, and this would make the battle much better for Naruto and Sasuke compared to Whitebeard, as attacks like Mihawk's giant casual sword slash that was literally meant to test the distance So, this would just be, a magnitude of a fighter that Mihawk is, with him standing atop the verse, and this is just a good display of that. However, would Mihawk ever even make the decision to do this, as he would just have to slash apart the entire island, which is a rather casual feat, especially from a fighter like Mihawk, who obviously scales above Law, who is, able to cut the entire Punk Hazard Island in half. So Mihawk's attacks can pose quite the threat, but I highly doubt that he ever uses them unless Naruto and Sasuke enter the majestic attire Susanoo. Kizaru also opens this battle with his Sacred Jewel Light Beam Blast, which was countered initially by Marco, and while this is still a casual Kizaru attack, it still would have caused way too much destruction. We also have Akainu's Great Eruption Magma Fist, which is able to again cause quite the damage to Whitebeard's ship. Again, with this being more of a test, making, casual remarks to Whitebeard saying, stick to lighting candles on my birthday cake, Magma Boy, with Akainu then rebuttaling, don't you want a brightly lit funeral, end quote. So these are just demonstrating how playful the admirals and I guess Whitebeard are at the beginning of this fight. This is further supported with how much better the admirals do later in a fight, with Akainu being much more aggressive, trying to capitalize on how Whitebeard weakened after his heart attack, making him much further from his prime self, as we do get implications of how Whitebeard was weakening prior to ever even entering the Marineford battlefield, such as the Ace novel stating how Whitebeard isn't like his old self who used to tussle with Roger. As people get older and get weaker, there isn't really a medicine or a devil fruit to fix that, or at least as far as he's concerned. So the admirals' approach to Naruto and Sasuke is probably going to be very aggressive, since they don't have this hindrance and they are just practically starting in the plaza. So the admiral's incentive to hence stop Naruto and Sasuke from being closer to the platform is probably much higher, and considering how much higher Naruto and Sasuke scale in AP, they would literally just be one-shotting virtually anybody here, with Naruto likely using clones as he did in the Fourth War, with all of them still being not that inferior to the main body. So these clones would be the high pressure that he needs, while Sasuke can go on to battle the high tiers. And I mean, Sasuke is already having potentially the most busted arsenal here, with his Renegon granting him abilities like the Emino Teijikara and an extremely amped Genjutsu, which just allows him to instantly swap with his body with an object or person that he could then just literally swap places with the guard standing alongside Ace, or the the prison stones or whatnot. So he could just, again, maybe even decide to do battle with the Navy's strongest admiral, Akainu Sakazuki, who possesses the Mag fruit, which grants him the highest offensive power of any devil fruit, simply due to how hot the magma truly is. However, this isn't really anything to Sasuke, as we know that even as far back as his fight with Itachi, he was able to use Orochimaru's substitution technique to escape Amaterasu, and while Amaterasu initially landed on the curse mark wing, it doesn't really matter, as we could see it actually covers his entire back, reaching to his right shoulder, yet Sasuke was able to Chidori through the roof and then exit his body through the mouth, and the Amaterasu is far hotter than any magma Akainu could possibly produce. Akainu is a Logia fruit user, which Logias are literally just natural elements made combat applicable, and the hottest magma ever found on Earth, with the literal core of the planet being only 9,932 degrees Fahrenheit, with the average lava just being 2,200 degrees, which is actually practically nothing to the Amaterasu, which is actually stated to be comparable to the sun in its heat, which at its core is 27 million degrees, making that a literal 12,000 times difference in heat between the magma Akainu can produce and the flames that Sasuke can substitute out of. I mean, this isn't that crazy. Even KCM1 Naruto was catching magma punches from Rochi in the beginning of the war. The Amaterasu, and more specifically Inton Kagetsuchi, is possessed by Sasuke, and he can also just burn Akainu's magma and literally battle him offensively with it. However, considering it's only fair to do verse equalization due to chakra literally resembling qualities of Haki, but it's just much more versatile, with characters hardening their skin and attacks similar to the armament, and using chakra based ocular jutsu to use precognition, which Sasuke has. So he could just pierce Akainu with his sword that would literally just be able to tank attacks from Kinshiki Otsutsuki, a literal planet splitter. But if not, then Sasuke could just Genjutsu Akainu via injecting his chakra into Akainu's brain, which really means that at least to hold Akainu off, he could then just subdue him temporarily to get rid of that as a threat. Then, here's what Naruto and Sasuke need, where they just have the advantage over like what Whitebeard's fleet had, and just that they just need to get Ace and then escape, which is much easier with 2 men rather than 49 ships full of them. Naruto can also enter the fray, which Naruto's chakra reserves have been implied to be nearly limitless, which is ridiculous but consistent considering how Naruto gave chakra and heavily amplified over 10,000 shinobi to a point where a character like Kakashi got 3 times stronger, and Naruto still fought for the rest of the day, not fatigued, facing the strongest fighters to ever live. So if Naruto joins then, and they can then just jump the main forces to get Ace, or Sasuke could then just take the remaining admirals while Naruto takes on the warlords and all the other formidable people, like maybe even just the, the average naval officers or whatnot. Which, I mean, people like to put the warlords against the Akatsuki, which is just nothing compared to adult Naruto. And while I do think the warlords probably could beat the Akatsuki, adult Naruto probably not. Mihawk is by far the strongest warlord here and the most powerful swordsman, but considering base Luffy was weaving Mihawk whilst he apologized for the power not knowing any restraint, and while this Mihawk is probably holding back in some aspects, maybe in a few different aspects rather than what he mentioned, if base Luffy is dodging this pre-time skip, is it crazy to say that adult 6-pass Sage Mode Naruto would as well? So yes, Naruto would just weave Mihawk, or at least cause Mihawk to not want to stay, as he's not that adamant in fighting in this war. If Aokiji Kuzan, another admiral, came to help Akainu, then it wouldn't really be much better, against Sasuke, as while there are arguments to say that Aokiji is actually stronger than Akainu, at least around this time, since in chapter 303, the Gorosei is actually angry at how Kuzan can't seem to take his rank seriously, with him wandering about as an admiral and him actually being the greatest naval force, yet he's just wandering around on the ocean. This could be actually directly implying that Aokiji is stronger than Akainu or anybody else at the HQ, at least here, but it also could just be argued as a title reference, and I don't really care to argue over that considering his ice and Akainu's magma are actually implied to be very much relative, with them completely altering the climate of an island, being Punk Hazard, making literal glaciers, volcano structures, terraforming it entirely with equal sides of ice and magma. This idea is obviously a victim to Sasuke's Amaterasu as well, as weirdly enough, ice is a very formidable power in Naruto, at least at the high levels, such as the Ice Realm from Kaguya, which he completely froze Naruto and Sasuke, so the point where actually Naruto's truth-seeking orbs that literally negate and counter any known properties, erasing existence itself, couldn't do anything but barely creep through the ice, yet Sasuke's Inton Kagetsuchi was able to completely shatter it all instantly, just both going to show the ability it possesses in heat and force. So this would also literally just melt anything that Aokiji has, so Sasuke literally has the hardest counter to Aokiji and should be able to deal with him, similarly to Akainu, and he just genjutsus him with the Rinnegan Amped Genjutsu, or his superior Chubaku Tensei, which just makes the target the core. Even Sasuke could just Tengai Shinsei the entire Marineford base, like how Madara just did as a Chad in the war, which is possible, and it's just to kind of help cause that damage and catastrophe they need. It's still very questionable if stronger foes like Sengoku interfere, and I see no reason as to why they wouldn't, as Sengoku right now is the strongest naval officer, even above the normal 3 admirals individually, and just seeing them, I guess, get throttled by Sasuke and his advantages, or his Tengai Shinsei and Chibaku Tensei, he'll just probably be forced to intervene, and Sengoku interacting with him is quite strange, as he literally just smacked Blackbeard, the self-proclaimed strongest man in the world, and the character who believes he can sink this entire base. So I'll just say that if Sengoku doesn't intervene here, Naruto and Sasuke are without a doubt taking Ace. And Ace will be able to also aid them in battle, similar to how he actually did in the main series, Ace being comparable to a much later Red Rog Luffy, so he can actually definitely help out in this battle and help battle the Navy to then help himself escape. I will say Sengoku is still very ambiguous at this time, as the last time we see him really do anything before he's old and retired in Dressrosa is here, so if you really subscribe to Sengoku being massively above Akainu and Aokiji and Kizaru, then Naruto and Sasuke could just both jump him, and I think that shouldn't be disingenuous to say that they win if they do jump him when taking into account what they did against a foe like Fused Momoshiki. Naruto could just also go into his full avatar and blast the entire base, a bomb from Kurama that's much greater than the combined might of 6 Bishu bombs, even capable of being multi-continental individually, hence to why Naruto in this form is implied to be able to actually destroy the world. So this probably would just hammer home the idea that the Navy can't continue any longer, or else too many casualties will result. For the Navy to care enough over someone like Ace, who while is one of the largest targets in the world, there's always another chance, and the chance to rebuild the entire Navy, probably not so much. Last but not least, if you're still not super convinced, then Naruto does have Baryon mode, and worst comes to worst, he can just activate that. And Baryon mode is an extremely powerful form, the greatest in the series, and while many people will think it's just an ass pull or they don't like it, you still have to acknowledge that the amp that Naruto gets from it is just ridiculous. If you guys are very unfamiliar with it, then you could always watch Seth the Programmer's video on it, as I do believe he does cover that very well. But for here, the main points would be that Kurama compares the process of fusing with chakra to nuclear fusion in literal stars, so you can then compare the amount of difference in stars to produce and how much they produce during this process, which some sources display hydrogen 2 producing an omega electron volt, meaning that if you take the molar mass and convert it to joules per gram of hydrogen 2 undergoing fusion, then the result will produce 48,242,663,984 joules with only a single gram of typical air that we breathe. So now your typical exhale is now a power capable of blowing up a building 50 times over. So this initial level of energy from breathing is what results in 48 billion joules. So considering that Kurama can turn the world to ash and blow up continents without this, do what you will with what kind of an amp this can be. I wouldn't even say that's insane, considering how earlier I mentioned that Naruto's chakra stores were nearly infinite, and yet they were almost all used merely in a few seconds, most likely. Even Sasuke, who we've established to be an equal to normal Naruto, is having trouble even perceiving him with his Sharingan amped vision. So imagine the admirals and the other fighters who were just kind of below Naruto and Sasuke before, and I mean, do I even have to say what he would do to them? Even the cloak itself literally drains life force itself, so if Naruto came into contact with Sengoku or Garb with the speed, he low-key might be hitting everybody with the speed, by the way. But for them, it's just especially dangerous with how their age actually affects their power level so much nowadays. But maybe I'm tripping. Maybe these One Piece characters are just a bajillion times the speed of light, and Naruto characters are subsonic at best. Either way, whatever interpretation you have, I really do hope you enjoyed this video or you learned something, as that's my goal here, to give you guys different interpretations to conclude on your own, since the controversy of this topic is just overwhelming. So, the dislikes will also be, but hey, that's the game. If you guys did enjoy it, then please maybe let me know if you do enjoy these One Piece, X Naruto videos, or you just want to see more of them in the future, then please, again, let me know. And yeah, please like and subscribe. There was a lot of research that had to go into this. Shout out to my friend Marv, who has a TikTok that will actually be linked in the description, so make sure to go check him out, as he did help out with many calculations in this video, along with the Lounge's Battle Wiki website that is very reliable. So yes, shout out to them, and as always, love you guys.